Hey there, I'm Mark from Spectrum Pulse, and today we have from MJ Lenderman Manning Fireworks. So my experience with MJ Lenderman is probably a little more fraught than you might expect. I first became familiar with him thanks to his guitar work in Wednesday on their album Rat Saw God last year, 2023, specifically some country twinges that showed up on that project and got overpraised by the critics who really like country music so long as it's not country musicians making it. Probably would put Big Thief and Waxahachie in that category as well. Now that, alongside seeing MJ Lenderman incessantly show up in my genre-specific Bandcamp recommendations for all the more rapturous critical acclaim, well, left me with a certain reluctance to dig into his solo work, and that's absolutely unfair to the guy. So when his newest album showed up on my schedule, I figured I would give him a proper chance. And you know what, it's funny, I don't think country is quite the correct signifier for his shaggy but generally likable sound. Yeah, there's some twang in the guitars and his delivery, but it reminds me a lot more of the very 90s blend of slacker rock and adult alternative that occasionally borrowed from country but largely avoided the neo-traditional sounds of that era, instead embracing some rougher rock edges. Think Jason Molina of Magnolia Electric Company or Song Ohio. Neil Young's 90s revival might fall in this camp as well. Now, I don't dislike the sound, it's always kind of stuck around, not quite fallen into the nostalgia window, and there are a fair few acts that make it that I largely like, and you know what, MJ Lenderman does a solid version of it once he mostly cleaned up the mixing and wrote some slightly tighter hooks on 2022's Boat songs, but I'm also a lot cooler on it than certain Gen X or / early millennial critics, especially those who shun all other kinds of country, and thus I can kind of appreciate the irony that Manning Fireworks is probably his best album to date, easily his most country in terms of chord progressions and ragged fiddle and lap steel, but also because it lands that alt-country crux point of 90s deflective irony, where you can laugh a little at the sad sack who's on display, but also alongside genuine heartfelt pain and potentially empathizing with that dude, where the obvious emotional real-life parallel could be sketched to his breakup with Wednesday frontwoman Carly Hartzman, who often contributes subtle backing vocals across the project, a presence that is always felt. And while one can laugh at many of the scenes of this largely pathetic guy told in both first and second person, preening overconfidence but lazy and insecure and masturbating furiously, full of self-flagellating Catholic angst and drunken sloppiness, who keeps repeating the same mistakes over and over again in relationships, where even the little material successes, be they on the stage or with a new smartwatch, reveal how lonely and self-destructive he really is. So many of the details feel a little too real, a cry for help and empathy that challenges the audience to see themselves in those scenes as much as they might laugh at them. And there are some great lyrical moments. I love the farce of projection on She's Leaving You as he tries to hold it all together. I really like On My Knees letting the alcohol burn through the disaffection, as the freedom of being on vacation brings out everything that's just below the surface in a tired blur of emotion. And even if the title track has a political subtext referring to a certain ex-POS-in-chief down south, its puncturing of self-destructive machismo wrapped up in religion, excellently done. But it's also a tricky balance, especially due to how small-scale these scenes are, and how Lenderman is often more compelling than charismatic. His hangdog delivery did eventually grow on me, but he also knows he's not a strong singer, and finding empathy in those shabby, unfiltered moments can be kind of difficult, especially when any deeper ounce of self-reflection might undercut some of the darker humor, and sometimes on songs like You Don't Know the Shape I'm In, the watery petulance and that fizzy drum machine kind of tested my patience. But I'll also admit that a lot of the country and emo I like will get just as dark and raw and occasionally funny and doesn't need the ironic deflection, which might be why I feel a little bit distant from this album. Probably the generational divide too. I get it. It also helps matters that many of the arrangements and production are probably the most refined Lenderman's delivered to date, from the shuddering fiddle in the opening title track and Rip Torn to the sour swagger of Wristwatch counterbalanced by the steel to build into a really nice solo, to the meteor riffs on the solo on Rudolph and just the song on a whole and On My Knees. And I was really surprised how much I dug the droning ambient outro of Bark at the Moon, which really nails the feeling of playing Guitar Hero over and over to beat an old Ozzy Osbourne song, that existential emptiness of playing the facsimile of the instruments for a strong that is yearning for that comeback but might not see it. Unfortunately, some of the intricacy doesn't really wind up in the grooves and percussion outside of the album highlight She's Leaving You, too. Most of the drums there are well mic'd, but occasionally you get a blown out kick drum or a bass line that feels kind of a bit shapeless and could afford to have a little bit more flair. It creates that feeling of an underlying stodginess that might make sense for a lot of these slovenly characters stuck in their ways, but I'll admit kind of loses flavor after a while. These could have more momentum. But overall, you know what, if I outright love the album, I think I'd be able to bypass some of my frustrations around the discourse around Lenderman and this brand of country-leaning indie rock a lot more effectively. I mean, it's not his fault the album got put on a pedestal, and the critics who should listen to more country will not seek those other albums out. But on the flip side, again, there's a certain emotional distance I still have from Manning Fireworks, and some of that is generational hangups I really can't quite shake. This will play to more of Gen X or Gen Z. I absolutely think it's really good, with great high points, probably MJ Lenderman's most emotionally informed and well-produced project to date, but this brand of slacker rock doesn't really pick up that deeper emotional resonance for me in the same way that I know it will for others. I appreciate it a lot more than I love it, but you know what, if you're in that demo for this brand of 90s throwback, with the sharp and self-deprecating writing to back it up, I can imagine you're gonna like this a lot. And even otherwise, yeah, you know what, it's still really good. Worth a listen. Check it out. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you want to see more, please be sure to like, share, drop comments, subscribe. I'll admit this might be cooler on it than several folks. This is getting metric tons of critical acclaim, but again, I know which critics are giving it out, and this is just not clicking for me as much as I would like. I still respect it, it's just not as deep as it would otherwise click for me. Beyond that, though, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And if y'all want to get involved and help and support the channel, joining the community, beyond buying my merch below, well, I'd normally point you toward my Patreon, where you could join my Discord or just help contribute to my schedule. I will say something new is coming up on my channel, will be announced very soon. Stay tuned for that. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.